The irony of my father. So my dad is hardcore lefty, has been his whole life. Well, actually, my whole life, at least, and is a hardcore education person. So my entire life, my father's career was in education. Started in teaching, moved into administration, and then up the ranks until he was superintendent for many many years. And so Ed, he's got a master's degree in education and child psychology or something like that. And, he knows what he's talking about, at least as far as the propaganda, public education, status propaganda is when it comes to education. And so he's all about education, all about education. You got to get a degree, got to get a degree, got to go to school. The only way you're going to succeed, blah, 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 all the usual same, BS talking points. So back when I was a lefty, and I was very much a lefty because of my dad, at least largely in part because of my father and his influence on my life, I took his advice. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go to school. I didn't go to school right out of high school. I mean, I did go to college for a year, but I was literally a child still, even at the age of 18, 19. So that didn't last long. Lasted like a year and a half, and then went and did my own thing for about a decade, and wound up in LA after going to music school, after doing the cruise ship for 2 years, and then a little more than 10 years later, about 2014, I said, you know what, I am going to go back to school. I'm going to get a proper degree. Okay, I got a music degree, but that's not a real degree. So I wanted to get a proper degree, and at first I went for electrical engineering, but then calculus literally made me go deaf. So I said, well, never mind on that. I'll scale it back a bit. Economics. That was another interest of mine, something that I was very passionate about at the time as well, because I was falling very much into the leftist mind trap. And so I, like I said, got into economics specifically with the intent of proving socialism works, proving Keynesian economics works, and proving that modern monetary theory works. So I got into that. In my first class, Macro 1A at Pasadena City College, was with this professor, and I need to go back through my emails, and I need to find his name. I need to reach out to him, and I need to thank him for saving my life, because he was more on the Austrian Mises side of economics. And so learning Macro 1A from him, even though he didn't deliberately say that, he did actually once in passing, but I didn't know what it meant at the time. But learning macro from him laid the perfect foundation for me to understand how economics works in reality and not in Keynesian illusory fantasy land. So, it was so perfect. I got so lucky. And it was the only reason that I even ended up with him was because I was working full time at the time, and I needed a Saturday class, and he was working full time as well. So, and he just taught on the weekends for some extra cash. And oh man, talk about getting so lucky. So not only did I read all the books that were required in the class, which was actually just one standard textbook, I read all of the additional books that he recommended. And all of them were sort of like, without saying it, they were basically intros into thinking about economics from an Austrian point of view, from a Robin and Mises point of view. And oh my God, I am so glad I read those books. And then I went through the rest of the degree, did all the other econ classes, and as I was going through all those, all the macros and the micros and the advanced stuff and the advanced monetary theory, my focus was monetary theory too, because that was something that I knew I was interested in. It was something I knew I didn't understand, and I really wanted to understand. And as I was going through all of that, I was constantly reflecting back to this foundation in my macro classes, thanks to this one professor. And I was always using that as the reference point, or at least like trying to coalesce that information with these new classes, more advanced classes I was taking. And by the way, also included all the marketing classes I had to take, the business classes I had to take. I did all these interdisciplinary classes too, which was a huge mistake. But all of it was rooted in this foundation I had from my Macro 1A professor. So anyway, long story short, I'm done with the degree. I'm out in the real world now, and COVID happens. I get red pilled, and then I get orange pilled. And I realize that crypto's crap and Bitcoin is the only way. And all roads lead back to fiat. When you're going down the roads of identifying the problems of the world, all roads lead back to fiat, all of them, and that inherently leads to Bitcoin as a solution. And so, as Michael Saylor famously said, fiat's a problem and Bitcoin is the solution. And so that was basically what I discovered. That this is what in synthesizing all the information that I've been taught in my college career and in real life experiences as well. All of it points to this one thing, right? And so getting to the irony of my father, the real irony is that I went to school to prove leftism, to prove liberalism, to prove Keynesian, and I came out of it after actually looking at the facts and looking at the data and going through Fred websites and all those other kind of academic sources. I came out of it going, oh my God, I was wrong all along. He's wrong. He's been dead wrong all along. And in fact, much of the rot and problems and utter just disgust that we're seeing in this country is because of leftism. It is deeply rooted in liberalism, and that's the truth. That's the fact. And the only people who disagree with this are the people who have not actually looked at the facts. They're the people who have not actually taken the time to listen to anybody that disagrees with them or comes from a different point of view as them, and really genuinely try to understand their point of view or understand their argument, or even, like I said, even look at the data that they are using to support their point of view or support their framework. So it's just, I think it's the biggest bout of irony I've ever experienced in my life is the fact that my dad being so pro-education, when I finally did what he was saying I should do, it made it so that he and I can't even talk anymore about anything more than the weather and football. When we would get on the phone before, we would talk for an hour at least every time, once a week. And we talk about politics and, oh yeah, I agree on this and I agree on that and blah, blah, blah. And now we can't even talk about it. We had a Christmas a couple of years ago, 2021, I think it was, and he said he made some snide remark while we were watching football. I think about Aaron Rodgers, I think, and about probably, I'm pretty sure it was a vaccine or something. And I was just like, what? We just ended up in this conversation that was just not good. It was clearly deteriorating quickly. And man, he was pulling out talking points from the 80s, like, the whole voodoo economics or Reaganomics leftist talking point, which, by the way, if you've ever read or listened to Thomas Sowell, you know that talking point is completely debunked, has been debunked since the freaking 80s, like as long as I've been alive, basically. Yet he's still pulling out these ridiculous old talking points because to the left, knowledge is the only thing, and wisdom has no meaning. They only know knowledge and nothing else. And anyway, so that is the irony of my father. All knowledge, no wisdom. And it's sad. So anyway, okay, that's it for my political and cultural stuff for today.